People think doctors save lives. We cut, we stitch, we prescribe, we study until our eyes burn and our backs ache, believing that if we just learn enough, stay sharp enough, we can stop the worst from happening. I used to believe that too. Until the day a little boy named Jonas Rivera walked into my operating room, and everything I thought I knew about healing changed forever. My name is Dr. Corinne Adler, pediatric heart surgeon, 42 years old. By the time I met Jonas, I'd performed over 400 major surgeries. My hands had steadied through the most complex procedures. My mind had compartmentalized loss, because surgeons can't afford hesitation, or sentiment, or so I thought. Jonas Rivera was 7 years old. His medical file was a disaster of terminology: congenital heart defect, ventricular septal defect, previous failed procedures. But none of that prepared me for the boy himself. He had the smallest frame I'd ever seen for his age, eyes too big for his face. Yet they weren't afraid. They weren't even sad. They were curious. "Are you the one who's going to fix me?" he asked as I reviewed his chart. His mother, Maria, looked exhausted, a single mom, raising Jonas and working 2 jobs. She gripped her son's shoulders as if afraid the world might snatch him away at any moment. "I'll do everything I can," I answered carefully, "but this will be a difficult surgery." He shrugged, like I'd told him we were going to the grocery store. "Mom says you're the best." I wanted to tell him that best didn't mean perfect, that sometimes even the best couldn't work miracles. But I swallowed those words, not because they weren't true, but because that little boy deserved my full hope, not my caution. As I prepped for the procedure, I caught sight of a small object clutched in Jonas's left hand, a tiny toy bridge, gray plastic, worn edges. "Is that your lucky charm?" I asked. Jonas nodded. "It's my bridge. Bridges help you get from one side to the other." His mother smiled faintly. "It's from a school project. He says it helps him be brave." I thought little of it then, just a child's comfort object. But that bridge would come to mean more than any of us could have imagined. The surgery began on a rainy Thursday morning. The OR was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors and the murmur of my team. I'd studied Jonas's case for days, mapping out every step. Hours passed. We bypassed. We corrected. We repaired. But halfway through, something went wrong. Jonas's fragile vessels tore in a place no scan had revealed. His blood pressure plummeted. The monitors screamed. "Clamp!" I barked. Hands moved. Tools shifted. My mind raced through every possible solution. And then, silence. The monitors flatlined. No pulse, no blood pressure. My world narrowed to a single thought. Not this time. Not him. We worked furiously. Adrenaline surged. I ordered emergency interventions I hadn't used in years. After what felt like a lifetime but was only minutes, the flat line wavered. A beat. Another. Jonas's heart began to pump weakly under my hands. We stabilized him. Barely. But as we closed him up, I knew. His body had survived. For now. But this wasn't over. When Maria came to see him in the ICU, I braced for the question every parent asks: "Is he going to be okay?" I couldn't lie. We got through the surgery, but his recovery will be difficult, and this may not be his last operation. Maria didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She just nodded, brushing her fingers through Jonas's hair. "Then we'll cross the next bridge when we get to it." Jonas stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. He looked at me and whispered, "Told you bridges help." That was the moment something inside me shifted. I wasn't just Jonas's surgeon. I was part of his bridge, and soon I'd learn he would become part of mine. Jonas's recovery was the kind that defied predictions. He woke sooner than expected. His oxygen levels stabilized faster than the charts said they should. Within a week, he was sitting up, plastic bridge in hand, explaining to the nurses how bridges were stronger when they were built to bend, not break. His resilience inspired the entire pediatric wing. Staff who usually moved from room to room with clinical detachment began lingering at Jonas's bedside, listening to his theories about bridges, battles, and bravery. I watched from a distance, trying not to get attached, but I was already attached. Maria brought me coffee every morning, though I told her it wasn't necessary. She spoke about Jonas's dreams of becoming an architect, how he wanted to build real bridges one day. He says bridges help people get where they're supposed to be, she smiled. He thinks maybe he's supposed to help kids like him. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility tighten in my chest. Jonas wasn't just recovering. He was imagining a future, one I wasn't sure his fragile heart could sustain. And that terrified me. But fear had no place in a surgeon's mind, not when there were rounds to do, scans to review, and other children waiting for my hands to become their lifeline. It was during one of those rounds that the cracks beneath the surface began to show. Jasmine Cole, a 6-year-old patient in the room next to Jonas's, had a congenital lung condition. Her family couldn't afford the latest treatment, which wasn't covered by their insurance. They were facing discharge without a care plan. "We'll work something out," I told her father, but I knew the truth. The hospital's charity fund was already stretched thin, and administrative policy forbade physicians from arranging alternative financial support directly. That policy wasn't just a line in a handbook, it was a wall. A week later, Malik Jefferson, a 9-year-old leukemia patient, missed 2 chemotherapy sessions because his mother couldn't take time off work to bring him to the hospital. Then came Sophia Alvarez, an 8-year-old recovering from spinal surgery whose family was facing eviction. Case after case piled up. Different diagnoses. Same story. Medical treatment wasn't the only battle these families faced. It was survival. And the more I listened, the clearer it became. I was patching holes in a dam about to burst. One evening, as I reviewed Jonas's latest test results, Maria approached me in the hallway. "I heard about Jasmine," she said softly. Word traveled fast among the parents. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. The question stunned me. Maria, who worked 2 jobs and slept in Jonas's hospital room most nights, wanted to help other families. I shook my head. "You have enough to worry about." But her eyes held the same determination I'd seen in Jonas. "Maybe it's not about what I have. Maybe it's about what we can build. Together." Her words echoed in my mind long after she returned to Jonas's room. That night, I sat in my office, staring at a blank notepad. I thought about Jonas's bridge, about bending instead of breaking, about how, for all my medical training, I had no idea how to fix what was really hurting my patients. Then I picked up my pen. At the top of the page, I wrote, "The Bridge Project, Phase 1. My plan wasn't complex. At first, it was just a concept, a way to connect families in need with resources outside the hospital's rigid system: transportation assistance, meal programs, housing referrals, emotional support, nothing that would violate hospital policy. Or so I thought. When I presented the idea to the hospital's patient care committee, the initial response was polite interest. They scheduled a follow-up meeting for the following month. A month. Jasmine couldn't wait a month. Neither could Malik or Sophia. So I started small. I spoke with a local charity that provided transportation for low-income families. I contacted a food pantry willing to deliver meals to parents staying overnight in the hospital. I used my own money to cover the costs at first. Quietly, discreetly. No paperwork, no bureaucracy. Just bridges. Within 2 weeks, Jonas's mother was helping to coordinate meal deliveries. Jasmine's family received the treatment they needed through a grant we found. Malik's mother no longer had to choose between work and her son's chemotherapy. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something real. The other doctors noticed. Some were supportive. Others warned me I was treading dangerous ground. "You're crossing lines, Corinne," Dr. Elliot Vaughn, the hospital's chief medical officer, told me. "These families need more than medicine," I replied. "That's not your responsibility." I looked him in the eye. "It is now." I knew then that I was building more than a project. I was building a movement, and like any bridge, it would either stand strong or collapse under the weight of what came next. The bridge project was never meant to be more than a lifeline, a temporary measure to stop families from drowning in problems the hospital wouldn't or couldn't address. But lifelines have a way of becoming pathways. And pathways? They become movements. Word spread faster than I ever anticipated. Families once isolated by fear and stigma began connecting with each other. Maria, Jonas's mother, became a central voice, organizing meal trains and ride shares. Other parents followed her lead. Nurses volunteered their off hours to coordinate supplies and donations. Within a month, what started as a notepad scribble had grown into a network. The hospital administration tried to keep pace. They authorized a temporary family liaison position to monitor and assist the project, code for keeping an eye on what we were doing. But I didn't care, because for the first time in my career, I saw medicine not as a fortress, but as a bridge, and Jonas was the proof. He returned for follow-up appointments with more energy than I thought possible. His heart was holding steady, his spirit unbreakable. "I told you bridges work," he reminded me, holding up his plastic toy bridge. "I believe you now," I smiled, but not everyone shared that belief. At the next staff meeting, Dr. Elliot Vaughn voiced the concerns I knew were coming. "We're hearing complaints," he announced to the room. "Other departments feel overshadowed. Some claim families are being pressured to join the bridge project." "That's not true," I replied evenly. "Perception is reality, Dr. Adler." He wasn't wrong. The bridge project was becoming larger than any single physician, larger than the hospital's carefully maintained image, and that made people nervous. "Furthermore," Vaughn continued, "there are liability questions. We can't guarantee the safety or efficacy of external services you're connecting families to." "I'm not prescribing outside care," I argued. "I'm providing access to support." He raised a brow. "It's a fine line." A line I was already crossing. But when Jasmine's father stood up, he had come to the meeting uninvited. The entire room shifted. "I'm not a doctor," he said. "I can't tell you about policies or liabilities, but I can tell you this. Without the bridge project, my daughter wouldn't be alive today." He wasn't alone. Parents began attending these meetings regularly, not as silent observers, but as advocates. Every success story became both a shield and a sword. Yet for every family we helped, 5 more came forward needing the same. The need outpaced our capacity. I couldn't keep funding it alone. Volunteers were burning out. Donations trickled in, but not enough. It was time to make the bridge project official, legal, sustainable. I filed paperwork to register it as an independent nonprofit organization. That decision triggered the next wave of conflict. The hospital's legal team summoned me for a formal review. "You're creating a competing entity," Vaughn stated. "That could be seen as a conflict of interest." "It's not competing," I insisted. "It's complementing. We're filling gaps the hospital can't cover." "That's not how the board will see it." I was given a choice: dissolve the nonprofit and bring the bridge project fully under hospital control, or resign. I walked out of that meeting with a knot in my stomach. I had built something beautiful, but beauty alone wouldn't protect it. That night, as I reviewed Jonas's latest test results, still stable, still strong, Maria sat beside me. "You knew this wouldn't be easy," she said. "I thought the hardest part was saving Jonas's life." She smiled sadly. "Saving one life is hard. Saving the lives of many, that's a fight." Her words echoed the silent truth I had avoided for too long. The Bridge Project wasn't just a support group anymore. It was a rebellion against apathy, against isolation, against a system that treated patients like cases, not people. And like any rebellion, it was about to face its greatest test. The hospital's deadline loomed like a storm cloud over everything I'd built. 30 days. That was the time they gave me to dismantle the Bridge Project or face termination. 30 days to undo years of work, years of lives changed, lives saved. I tried to sleep at night, tried to remind myself of all the patients I had helped, But when my eyes closed, I didn't see statistics or policies. I saw faces: Jonas, Jasmine, Malik, Sophia, and dozens of others. They weren't cases in a file. They were voices, stories, futures. I wouldn't abandon them. So I did what surgeons are trained not to do. I stepped out of the operating room and into the public eye. With Maria Rivera's help, we gathered testimonials from families touched by the Bridge Project, short video clips, handwritten letters, photos of children now thriving because someone had cared enough to fight for them. We launched a campaign, Bridges Over Barriers. Within 48 hours, the stories spread across social media. Local news stations picked up the narrative. Families once hesitant to speak out now stood proudly, sharing how the Bridge Project had given them more than help. It had given them hope. Malik's mother spoke at a press conference. When the system told us to wait, Dr. Adler and the Bridge Project told us to fight. I'm standing here today because someone finally saw us not as problems, but as people. The response was overwhelming. Teachers offered after-school care. Local businesses donated supplies. Churches opened their halls for Bridge Project meetings. Even a retired bus driver volunteered transportation services for medical appointments. The movement had found its voice, and it was loud. Of course, not everyone cheered. Hospital administrators accused me of endangering professional boundaries. Anonymous online critics claimed I was turning personal charity into a publicity stunt. Dr. Vaughn remained silent, but his allies began pressuring volunteers to withdraw. Some did, but for every person who stepped back, 2 more stepped forward. Then came the letter that changed everything. A law firm representing a coalition of local philanthropists reached out. "We have been following the Bridge Project's impact," it read. "Our clients wish to offer foundational funding for an independent community health initiative under your leadership. Full financial backing. Complete operational freedom." I stared at the letter in disbelief. Maria squeezed my arm. This is what happens when a movement becomes bigger than its obstacles. But accepting that funding meant severing ties with the hospital completely. No more privileges. No more access to their facilities. I would be on my own. The final decision rested with me. Jonas, now stronger than ever, sat beside me as I weighed the choice. "You always tell me bridges are for crossing," he said, "not for standing still." Out of the mouths of children. The next morning I met with Dr. Vaughn and the hospital board. "I won't dissolve the Bridge Project," I told them. "I'll expand it, independently." Vaughn's face tightened. "You'll lose institutional support. I have community support, and that's worth more." Silence followed. A heavy, expectant pause. "This is a mistake," Vaughn warned. "No," I corrected. "It's a beginning." With that, I handed in my resignation. I expected fear, panic, regret, but all I felt was clarity. I wasn't leaving a career. I was crossing a bridge of my own making. And on the other side waited a future no policy could control, one defined not by limitations, but by possibility. The resignation should have felt like an ending, but it wasn't. It was a spark. The day after my departure from the hospital, the media frenzy intensified. What began as a human interest story became a headline. Doctor resigns to defend life-changing program for families in crisis. The Bridge Project, a community's battle for hope. Families flooded the hospital's voicemail and inboxes, demanding explanations. Former patients sent letters. Donors withdrew pledges to the hospital and redirected them to the Bridge Project's new foundation. But I wasn't interested in punishment or revenge. I was interested in building. Our new facility, a modest building donated by one of the philanthropists, opened within 2 weeks. Volunteers arrived daily. Teachers, social workers, therapists, people who had no medical degrees but understood something far more important: the power of connection. We expanded quickly. Transportation assistance became formalized. Meal services grew into full pantry programs. Peer support groups formed organically. Maria coordinated family services. Malik's mother led the mentoring committee. Jasmine's father helped manage logistics. Even Jonas found a role. Though he was still recovering, he insisted on helping younger children build their own model bridges, a symbolic tradition now embedded in the program's identity. "You told me bridges help people get where they're supposed to be," he reminded me. "And where do you think we're going?" I asked. He grinned. "Everywhere." But just as the bridge project reached new heights, the hospital made its move. Dr. Vaughn held a press conference. He announced a new hospital initiative, the Family Care Collaborative. It was, in his words, a comprehensive program designed to meet the holistic needs of pediatric patients and their families. In truth, it was a thinly veiled attempt to recapture the narrative and neutralize the bridge project's momentum. "They're trying to replace us," Maria fumed. "No," I said calmly. "They're reacting to us. That's different." Still, the challenge was clear. If the hospital succeeded in convincing families to return to its care model, the Bridge Project would lose critical mass. So we took a stand. We organized a Community Voices Forum, inviting every family who had ever participated in the Bridge Project to share their stories publicly. I expected 20 or 30 to attend. Over 200 showed up. Parents, grandparents, siblings, even children who had once been patients themselves, now grown and thriving. Local media covered the event. National outlets followed. One by one, families took the stage. Some shared triumphs. Others spoke of ongoing struggles. All echoed a single, unifying truth. The Bridge Project hadn't just provided services. It had restored dignity. Malik, now a confident teen, addressed the crowd. "When my mom first brought me here, I thought I was alone. Now I know I never will be again. We're not just patients, we're a family." The applause was thunderous. Then Jasmine's father stepped up. "They tried to tell us this program was unsustainable, that it crossed lines, but you can't measure the value of being seen, of being heard. That's what Dr. Adler gave us. That's what the Bridge Project gave us. And we won't give it up." The next morning, an open letter signed by over 300 families was published in multiple newspapers. "We choose the Bridge Project. We choose our community. We choose to build, not be rebuilt." Hospital leadership had underestimated something critical. They thought this was about services. It was about trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't return just because a new program is launched. It must be rebuilt. Brick by brick, bridge by bridge. At the next board meeting, where Vaughn had planned to announce the hospital's expanded initiative, only a handful of families attended. The rest were at the Bridge Project's new center, helping prepare for our next phase, expanding to neighboring counties. As Vaughn spoke to an almost empty room, Maria leaned toward me. "They tried to outbuild us. And instead," I said, "they proved why we needed to build in the first place." The battle wasn't just won. It was transformed. The Bridge Project was no longer an alternative. It was the future, and no policy or institution could take that away. Victory was never declared in a single moment. It unfolded, quiet but unstoppable, like the slow rising of a tide. In the months following the Community Voices Forum, the Bridge Project solidified its role not just as a support system, but as a model for what modern pediatric care could and should look like. New families arrived weekly. Some drove hours from neighboring counties. Others came by bus or carpool, guided not by advertisements or hospital referrals, but by word of mouth, by trust, by stories. Jonas, now 11, had become our unofficial ambassador. His plastic bridge, once a personal talisman, now stood as a larger sculpture in the lobby of our center, rebuilt in polished wood and engraved with the names of every family who had crossed it. One day, as I walked past that sculpture, I found Jonas explaining it to a new child. "This isn't just my bridge anymore," he said. "It's everyone's." Children understood symbols better than most adults, but while we celebrated growth, I knew challenges still lurked. The hospital's Family Care Collaborative continued quietly. They offered incentives, reduced fees, transportation vouchers, to lure families back. They released carefully curated reports highlighting their new holistic approach. But numbers can't capture loyalty, and loyalty had shifted. Then something unexpected happened. I received a letter from the State Health Innovation Council. They wanted to study the Bridge Project as a potential statewide model for community-integrated pediatric care. The council had already reviewed data. They'd heard the testimonials. They believed what we were doing could reshape how care was delivered, not just here, but everywhere. At first I hesitated. Scaling a program that had grown organically, intimately, into something larger came with risks. Could we maintain the trust and connection that defined us? But Maria and Malik's mother reminded me we had already scaled, not through bureaucracy, but through people. "This isn't about building a bigger bridge," Maria said. "It's about building more of them." The council arranged a formal review. Analysts visited. Interviews were conducted. Families shared their stories again, not to plead for the Bridge Project's survival, but to celebrate its impact. Meanwhile, Jonas's latest checkup revealed something extraordinary. His heart, once fragile, was now strong enough to reduce his risk category. No further surgeries were expected for the foreseeable future. "You've crossed more than one bridge," I told him. He smiled. "That's because I didn't cross them alone." While state approval for broader funding moved forward, another turning point approached. Dr. Vaughn requested a private meeting. We hadn't spoken in months. When he arrived at the Bridge Project Center, not the hospital, but our space, he seemed older, tired. The sharp authority that once defined him had softened. "I came to talk, not to argue," he began. I listened, arms crossed but open. "I was wrong," he admitted, "about a lot of things. I tried to protect the institution, not the people it was meant to serve. You reminded me what that responsibility truly means." He paused, looking around at the bustling center. Children laughing, parents talking, volunteers moving with purpose. "I'd like to discuss collaboration," he continued, "not control, partnership." It wasn't a surrender. It was a recognition. And recognition matters. After consulting with our board, made up entirely of family members, volunteers, and former patients, we agreed to limited collaboration. The hospital could refer families to the Bridge Project, share best practices, learn. But ownership remained with us. That partnership marked the final shift. The Bridge Project, once an outsider effort, became the benchmark. Other hospitals reached out. Other communities requested guidance. We created toolkits, training modules, and mentorship programs. Children once isolated in their struggles now found bridges waiting for them. Not just one, many. Because what we built was never about a single solution. It was about creating a foundation where solutions could grow, where resilience wasn't just a word, but a lived experience, where stories weren't hidden in medical files, but shared with pride. Jonas's Bridge wasn't a symbol anymore. It was a movement. And we were only just beginning. Change doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly, in small acknowledgments, in policies rewritten, in closed doors finally opening. 6 months after our meeting with Dr. Vaughn, the State Health Innovation Council officially endorsed the Bridge Project as a model for statewide pediatric care reform. But it wasn't just recognition, it was replication. Hospitals across the state requested consultations. Schools asked for training on trauma-informed support. Nonprofits adapted our community integration model. What once was dismissed as overstepping boundaries became best practice. The same administrators who once questioned the Bridge Project's legality now sought our guidance, not out of obligation, out of necessity. The need was undeniable. The results were undeniable. Children were not only surviving, they were thriving. Jonas's story became the centerpiece of our new outreach program. His plastic bridge, the one he had carried into my operating room years ago, was now encased in glass at the front of the center, beside a plaque that read, "Bridges aren't just built to cross, they're built to carry others too." One afternoon, I walked through the center's expanded wing, now hosting therapy sessions, parent education classes, and youth leadership groups. I paused at the mentorship room, where older teens like Malik worked with younger children. Jonas sat with a boy named Ethan, helping him sketch his own bridge design. "This part is important," Jonas explained, pointing to the supports, "because even if the road looks smooth, you need strength underneath." His wisdom was no longer surprising. It was natural. Outside the center, the community garden, once a vacant lot, now flourished with vegetables, flowers, and a mural of interconnected bridges painted by families. As I stood admiring the scene, Maria joined me. "Do you remember when we thought this might all fall apart?" she asked. "Every day," I admitted. She smiled. But it didn't. No, it had evolved, and so had we. The final shift came sooner than expected. The hospital board voted to dissolve the Family Care Collaborative. It had failed to engage families the way the Bridge Project had. In its place, they proposed a new department, Family Integration Services, built in direct partnership with the Bridge Project's leadership team. Dr. Vaughn approached me with the proposal. "This time," he said, "we want to listen first, not dictate." I agreed under one condition. The families remain in charge of their own narratives. Always. He nodded. It was not a surrender. It was growth. But not everyone shared that growth. Some of the administrators who had resisted us from the beginning resigned quietly. Others remained, but their roles shifted from gatekeepers to facilitators. Malik's mother joined the advisory board. Maria became the director of community engagement. And Jonas? He was offered a junior ambassador role for the statewide bridge initiative. When we announced these changes at the annual community gathering, more than 500 families attended. As the sun set over the garden, I took the stage. "Years ago," I began, "I thought my job was to fix broken things. Broken hearts, broken systems, broken families." I paused, letting the silence settle. "But I've learned something from all of you. We're not here to fix what's broken. We're here to build something stronger in its place." The crowd erupted in applause, and in that moment, I understood. We had crossed the bridge, but more importantly, we had built it so others could cross after us. People often ask me if I miss the operating room, the bright lights, the focused quiet, the certainty that my hands could mend what was broken. Sometimes, yes, but not in the way they expect. I miss the simplicity. In surgery, the problems had names: ventricular septal defect, arterial stenosis. They had solutions, or at least attempts at solutions: scalpel, suture, medication. But out here, in the world beyond the sterile walls, problems didn't come with clear labels: poverty, isolation, fear, hopelessness. There were no textbooks for those. When I started the Bridge Project, I thought I was creating a safety net, a temporary fix. I was wrong. We weren't just catching people who fell through the cracks. We were building a path forward, a bridge. And that bridge wasn't mine alone. It belonged to Jonas, whose resilience became our guiding star. To Maria, who turned her personal struggle into leadership. To Malik's mother, who transformed her pain into mentorship. To hundreds of families who dared to trust again, even to Dr. Vaughn, who chose growth over pride. The Bridge Project taught me that healing is not just a medical outcome. It's a human one. It's the moment a child realizes they are not alone. It's a parent understanding they don't have to carry the burden in silence. It's a community choosing connection over isolation. I've watched children who once faced hopeless diagnoses grow into leaders. I've seen parents once paralyzed by fear become advocates. I've stood beside colleagues who set aside hierarchy to learn from those they once dismissed. The journey wasn't without cost. We faced doubt, resistance, loss. But what we gained was far greater. We built not just solutions, but stories. Stories that now echo far beyond our original walls. Stories that inspire other communities to create their own bridges. And in every story, the same truth endures. We are stronger together. As I speak to you now, whether you are a doctor, a parent, a teacher, or simply someone who believes in the power of resilience, I offer you this. Don't wait for someone else to build the bridge. Be the one who starts. Even if it's small. Even if it's fragile at first. Because bridges aren't just for crossing obstacles. They are for carrying others forward. That is the unbreakable bond we chose to create. And it's a bond that will continue long after any single person, including me, has stepped away. Thank you for walking this journey with us. Thank you for believing that together we can build not just hope, but futures.